everyone. Listen, I haven't done this in a while and very nervous, so I would like to ask you to help me out a bit. If you could all please stand up. Really, everyone. Yeah, you're going to get that with every talk now because you're sleepy and everyone is going to try to wake you up. And give me really a big round of applause, like properly. Yes, yes, more. Thank you, thank you. I can tell everyone back home I received standing ovation now. Okay, so I want to talk to you today about building culture, and specifically building a database culture. And I chose this particular topic because I'm passionate about it, and I created this talk specifically for this conference. But also I work for a company, I'm a chief product officer at Sotrender. We're roughly 40 people now. Half of that is in the product and technology. And we process marketing data, specifically social media data, and we turn that data into analytics, automated reporting, audience engagement tools, and now we sprinkle that all with machine learning and some additional automations that we can do for our customers. So we should be good at measuring stuff and figuring stuff out from data, but it wasn't always like that. And we went through a path over the last 2 years since I joined the company that I want to share with you, and I want to help you kind of maybe apply some of that to your teams or businesses. So let's start with culture itself, because we're going to be building a database culture, and we first should establish what culture really is. I didn't know when I started writing this talk, so I decided to consult Google, and the first thing that came out was the arts and other manifestations of human intellectual achievement regarded collectively. That's some really deep shit. The second one was the ideas and customs and social behavior of particular people or society. So this is, I understand. So this is basically what we do and how we behave as a group, which can be very easily translated to what you're doing within the company. I really like the third one, though. It is to maintain something in conditions suitable for growth. And this is great for this conference, right? This is what we are trying to do. We're trying to keep our products and our businesses in a state of constant and sustainable growth. All right. Let's go deeper into the definition of culture. When you look at all the research that was done on culture, it boils down to two components. So ideas and artifacts. So essentially something for your soul and something, or your mind, or something more tangible. And we're going to discuss this in a second, but let's start with ideas. Ideas are our values, something that we hold dear or we want to protect, but it can be also our beliefs, so some fundamental laws that we don't question and we kind of will always support. And it's also the language that we use to describe those things. And in particular in business, you will have a lot of that language that I'm going to show you in a second that can either help you or really work against you. The artifacts are particularly interesting when you try to transition them to a business environment. Historically, that would be the wheel or the type of weapons that a particular culture or group of people used. But these days, this could be apps or software or hardware that you're using at work, or maybe some frameworks or more abstract concepts. But these are the tangibles of the modern economy. So what is a company culture, or what it actually does? It binds the people together, but it also sets your people, your company, apart from others. I recently heard someone say that culture should be divisive. It should actually tell your people who they are and what they're doing, but it also should tell other people that these are the things that we're not doing, and if you don't like that, you're not a good fit. Because only then, when you have something like that, you know that you've found something that is really distinguishable and can glue people together. What culture is not, it is not a slogan. So a lot of people sometimes think that culture can be described with something like, think different and buy an iPhone, or don't be evil, at least until you scale, or move fast and break things. Democracy, for instance. Those are not those things, and it can't be simplified to one simple statement. So we need to look at it in much broader terms and kind of like decompose the various aspects that I mentioned earlier. So let's start with beliefs. Everyone has some beliefs, and those beliefs usually will be already within your companies or your teams. Some of you might think, we fight for the users, as the Disney character Tron said. And this is something that usually a lot of product managers think, that they represent the voice of the user, they are the advocate of the users, and so on. Some teams or companies think that we monetize the users. I think it's a really kind of like, it brings this nice picture into my head. You put the user into a meat grinder and money comes out at the other end. Really something that we want the people to know. Developers will say that we build good, high-quality software, that we do it in the right way. Or the content managers, we will be writing engaging content, and so on and so on. And it's okay for every team or every squad or something like that to have their set of beliefs, but they really need to know kind of like where it all comes together. What do we believe in as a company? What are we doing together? And when you do that, you need to make sure that you describe it in a language that everyone will understand. These are just the things that I pulled out of our Confluence and emails, like OKRs, KPIs, Agile, user. User used to be someone that does drugs. Not that we don't, but story, so something, an object in software or product management, how you describe the user behavior, MQL and SQL. So even at our company, we've been using MQLs and SQLs for a while. MQL is marketing qualified lead. SQL is sales qualified lead. If you go to sales, if you go to IT, it's just how they ask the database for data. So when you start throwing those terms around kind of in a public forum, people are really confused. What are we talking about? And there are things such as recurring revenue, CAC, RPU, R. Pirates used to do R. Try to describe to your grandma what it actually means. So if you watch the language that you use within the company to describe the things that you're doing, make sure that everyone can understand the terms that you're using at your various meetings, in emails, and so on and so on. They need to, at the company level, bring people together, not divide people. That's why using acronyms is probably not a good idea. Using kind of like internal lingo or marketing speak is probably not a good idea. It's best to describe it in general terms. But there is one particular language that I personally hate, and it starts with, I believe that X will happen, or, I believe that if we build this, that will happen. We're not in a fucking church. Seriously. We live in an economy and we work in an industry where we can measure just about anything. We can analyze things, we can test things, we can experiment. So let's, when someone comes to you and starts their request for a change or something like that, even if it's your CEO with I believe, we need to kind of like get down to the important things. The last item in the culture ecosystem are the artifacts. And historically, as I said, this could be a wheel or weapons that we used, but our weapons of choice is the whiteboards and the post-it notes that we put on it, or our Jira, where we organize the stories and write documentation and run our software development process. It's the Google Analytics, how we track our marketing, and so on, or it's the Apple MacBook Pro with 24 HD UHD display and a stand-up desk that we will advertise in our job offers, because clearly, this is the most important thing about working in our company, that is going to make people believe in what we're doing. These are your tools of the trade. There's nothing like wrong or better about them. It's just be aware that this is where your culture kind of meets reality for a lot of your people. Okay, so yeah, it's supposed to be about building a database culture. I'm going way too fast. Just looked at the time. We had that particular quote earlier. What gets measured gets managed. And this is a quote that we had on our company meetings almost every time, I think, over the last year. when you put a number of something on something, you can actually start actively working with it. It stops the I believe process. It starts, okay, this number is X today. It's going to be, X plus 5% tomorrow, or it can be 95% of X the day after that. And this brings focus, but it also means that whatever you do, you can start measuring is a bad word here, but you can start managing and try to focus your all your activities on moving that number in one or the other direction. By the way, it's a quote from Peter Drucker, which you've probably heard earlier today, because one of the talks was what gets measured gets managed. What do we measure? Some of those things will be obvious to you, new users, unique users, I don't know, maybe conversion level or things like that. Those are usually kind of like outcome numbers, business numbers, and so on. And they are important. We have learned over time that some of them will be vanity metrics, for instance, the page view, but they might not be a vanity metric if you're running an ad business and you need the page views to have ad impressions and thus generate revenue. But you can also measure internal activities, so emails sent to your customers, or chat conversations, or the demos that you deliver to your customers, or the length of those demos, or the quality of those demos, and so on. So you can measure kind of like what happens in the business in terms of the outcome. You can measure what happens in the business in terms of what people do. And this is obvious to many people. What is not obvious is that you can also measure a lot of things, and sometimes you're already measuring it because some tools are doing it for you and you don't even know that. Sometimes you're not doing it, and those things can kill you. And so you're tracking bugs, for instance, but are you analyzing, how many of those bugs came in various points of time? What were the types of the bugs? How critical they are? How fast you solve them, and so on. You can measure page load speed, and Google Analytics is probably doing that for you already. But have you tried correlating conversion with the page load speed? Have you tried figuring out that your leads going down may be kind of at the same time your page load may be going up? So a lot of internal things, how your infrastructure works can and should be measured, because later, when someone comes to you and starts the sentence with, I believe we should upgrade our whatever Python from version X to version Y, you can ask them, but why? And what are the numbers that support that decision? And I'm going to come back to that later. There's one thing that I have to warn you against. There's this quote from Jurassic Park: your scientists were so preoccupied with whether or not they could that they didn't stop to think if they should. And this is something when I originally started at Sotrender and we started implementing product analytics and we started literally measuring everything. Our first implementation was at least 100 and something events, probably 50 attributes. And for the next, I don't know, year, we maybe used 20 of those. And that kind of generates two unwanted effects. The first one is you put a lot of work into measurement, because all those required actually technical integrations or people manually writing the numbers down, or so on and so on. And then you are not using those numbers. So by the time you actually will need them, things might have shifted, those integrations don't matter, those numbers are not consistent with your current business situation, and so on and so on. So a lot of that effort, when you go out of this talk and you figure, oh, okay, I'm going to measure everything, I'm going to build dashboards and a whole list of things that I want to track, and it's going to be counterproductive. So you have to start with something simple, the North Star. Sean spoke about it in the morning, and I'm very happy he did, because I only have two slides on this. This is your most important number. There are some things that Sean didn't say in the morning, and I want to kind of reiterate those. This number needs to be simple. This is something that I've learned personally. For some time, what we preached as the North Star at Sotrender was retention. Retention measured as the number of users that come back in the second week after they sign up for the trial. Now, even when I said that, it's not something that when you say at a company meeting or you talk to the salespeople about, that they instantly recognize how it's measured. There's a problem with a metric like that because it doesn't look good on charts and things like that. And so North Star needs to be really, really simple, like weekly active users, or, I don't know, number of loans given, or something that really translates well into the business. So it has to be business-oriented. There has to be a clear connection between the North Star and how you're making money, at least in the long run. Maybe not month to month or week to week, but in the long run. It needs to connect all the divisions or people in your organization. So people that write code, people that write content, people that sell stuff. They need to relate to that number. They need to be able to relate to that number, and they need to have a way of having an impact on that number. So it has to be actionable for them. They have to know that if they do something next week, that number will move in the direction that you want it to move. So simple, focused on the business, connecting everyone, and actionable for them, something that they can have their impact on. Building a database culture. So now I told you what the culture is, in my opinion, what the database culture is. Now, how do we actually build it? And it starts with language, at least to me. Edward Deming, the godfather of product quality and quality in manufacturing and improvement in business, said, "In God we trust, all others must bring data." I have simplified that quote because I'm not a religious person, and every time someone comes to me for a product decision, or in summary is a business decision, I require that that decision will be founded in data. That they don't start it with "I believe." If they don't have the data, maybe we can find a way to generate data. I'll say more about that in a second. But at least have a target for what you want to have after we implement something. But bring the data. Now, what are the building blocks? So we said that the culture are the beliefs and the language and the artifacts. So the basic belief is that data is important and that we are making decisions with data. The North Star, is our main artifact, but we need more, actually, because North Star is just a number somewhere out there. How do we get that number to move where we want? And that's OKRs. So this is our roadmap for getting there. OKRs, objectives and key results, also a big topic. I encourage you to read more about it. A methodology introduced by, I think, Google, or popularized by Google, that gives a call company objectives for a year and usually a quarter, and then you measure that objective with key results that you want to achieve. I'll show you some examples in a second. And then you need the artifacts and rituals that I will also discuss. So those are our internal documents. So OKRs, two examples. In the first column, you see the objective, what we want to do. The first one is increasing the value of one of our features. The second one is very simple, selling our product in a software as a service model. Now, those two are quite different. The first one would be called output-based OKR. The second one would be called impact-based OKR. Now, the difference between the two is that one only says what we're going to do, what we're going to deliver, also measured in, let's say, percentages in this case. This can be, the story points that you deliver in a particular quarter out of a certain backlog or something else. And in every book about OKRs, you will read that this is not something you should do. In my personal experience, for a lot of products, you will not have the scale of Twitter, so you can't always say, we're going to move conversion, 20% up in this quarter, because you will not have enough time to run the experiments to deliver those results. So you might as well have either a long-term for impact-based OKRs or a short-term for output-based, where your team still has something to focus on and they still know that they're measuring what they're doing, but they're not so tied to the fact that they need to see a particular number shift right this and then quarter. Now, for the long run, you can have the impact-based OKRs, which really measure what happened in the business after we did something. And in this case, this is revenue, but this could be something else. This could be, for instance, that you're going to increase the number of new signups by X%, and those are your 3 key initiatives that will actually make that happen. So OKRs are your roadmap for moving your North Star in a certain direction, or your business in general. And the key component of OKRs is that they are data-based. Another example, one of our sales dashboards, we put everything we have into HubSpot, and it's a quite tight integration between our product and HubSpot itself. So all of our CRM activities is there, all of our marketing activities is there, but our sales staff, for instance, have their leads prioritized by the activity in the product, by how big the company is, by some of the questions that we asked our customers along the way. And this way, they can work a lot faster. So sales needs automation. Automation needs data. And if you can give them a tool that will it's a tool of their choice, and they have all the data in that tool, they will start making decisions, and they will start doing their automation based on that data. And remember that reporting is one of the key and most important features of any CRM software. HubSpot wasn't great for that. Now it's a lot better. I think Salesforce is the best in the industry. Product is the hardest to measure because it's really the hardest. It depends on the product what is. If it's a simple like e-commerce site, it might be easier. If it's software as a service, such as our case, it starts to be really hard. So you start having things such as setup moment when the user actually sets everything up, and then aha moment when they realize the true value of the product. But you still need to have all those numbers, and you probably will need a lot more than one. And there are kind of like a couple things that I want to mention about this. This is not great clarity, to be honest, so you can't see all of that. But you need to know your focus. So for instance, in the product, we measure everything, but we only the only driver for our decisions, it's what happens to our international leads. So things that are coming outside of Poland, because that's where we want to focus our growth. We measure percentages because that's kind of how you can measure whether a certain flow works or the conversion's right and so on. But we also measure totals because if your marketing makes a bad decision on a campaign, they can flood your funnel with bad leads. That's going to move your numbers down, and you will have no idea what's going on if you're working only on percentages. And one thing that you need to be careful of is, kind of watchful of, is the length of the trend that you're looking at. So this in the bottom right corner, you have a metric that is suffering a slow and painful death. If we only watched it on a monthly basis, we would see that there might be slight decline, but it's nothing to worry about. If you watch it for 3 or 6 months, you see that this is something that you really need to start paying attention to. Another artifact example is how we measure our architecture. This particular chart at the bottom is when a certain bug was spotted that was generating a lot of errors in our API calls. And then it was finally identified, removed, and boom, this chart went all the way down, and that's the way how it should be. Now, 2 things here is what you don't know in terms of infrastructure will kill you, because if your clients start reporting bugs, that means you're already way too late. And you need to automate that stuff because you need to find out without looking at the charts. Now, I showed you a lot of data silos for a lot of teams in my company. And when you have many systems that bring the data together, you will start having some discrepancies. So how we're dealing with that is we've built one dashboard that we call data consistency, and it tracks one metric from 2 systems, one of the important metrics from 2 systems. And when we see those numbers there is a gap between them, that means that we messed up something in the technical integrations. And when that happens, your data starts being wrong, people stop trusting the data, and your whole foundation for the culture that you were trying to build can be disrupted. So it's important to either choose one source of truth, whether that's your main production database or something like that, or to have checks like that in place and make sure that your data stays consistent. Now, how do we bring the data together? We're using Google Data Studio, where we build dashboards that brings data from various systems that we can then share internally, so that the salespeople don't need to go into the product analytics to figure out stuff, or the IT people don't need to go to our marketing analytics to find out what our open rates are. So we can keep that all in one environment. It's not ideal. If I could recommend something, it's better to have one tool that has everything out of the box. Like, I would probably track everything in Mixpanel, because if you're trying to bring things into another solution, you either have ready-made connectors or you have to maintain all that yourself. But for the lack of anything better, we actually input a lot of data into the Data Studio manually. So every week, certain divisions do their numbers, they put them into charts, and we can have a common discussion about how well we're doing. So manual input is fine, especially if you don't have to do it too often. Some ritual examples. We have an all-hands meeting every week that starts with data. It starts with a dashboard showing on our funnel, and everyone can see clearly how well we're doing as a business, and probably what we need to focus on to make things better. We run the agile process, so we have refinements, plannings, and retros throughout all of the teams pretty much. Doesn't matter whether they're working on product development or marketing. And those also are data-driven, or data-fueled. So we analyze how many story points we do per week, or how many hours of tasks, whether we are on track, whether we are late, how it impacts our product releases, and so on. We have a separate meeting called Product Analytics, where every week all product managers gather and we discuss what is happening on a deep level within our product, and what research we should do to go deeper. For instance, our mobile conversion is going down. Why is our mobile conversion going down? There's a particular geography where it's going down, and so on and so on. And there are sales and customer service statuses that also start with data. They pull up their HubSpot and they discuss their results, their activities, and so on and so on. And that's what you need. You need the artifacts, you need the ideas or the beliefs, and you need the rituals to kind of make everything stronger. There are kind of two things that I wanted to mention finally. Database does not mean data-driven. I know that data-driven was in the last talk, and I don't want to say that this guy was wrong. But in terms of culture, you have to remember that you can't, or maybe you shouldn't measure just about everything, because there are a lot of there's a lot of side input that you need to have. You need to have user research. You need human input. There are some things around marketing that are supposed to hit your emotions, and it's kind of hard to describe them with numbers up front. And most of all, you don't have a lot of data for things that don't exist. So we can analyze everything our users are doing in our product, but if we're building something new, we only have assumptions. So we can only measure things post-fact. And one last thing that's going to happen over time is that as you get better and better at making decisions with data, you will be a lot better at making instinctive decisions. I think Malcolm Gladwell wrote a book called Blink on those kind of instant decisions that some people that have a lot of experience in a certain industry can make. And this is what is going to happen, is that your designer will be able to make a decision a lot faster instinctively after spending a lot of time working with data. But please do not tell me that it can't be measured. So we did a project recently where we moved a lot of our infrastructure to Kubernetes. It's a very technical project. It's really, at face value, it's kind of hard to tie it to any data or business. But I asked one of our technical leads, how do you want to measure it? How do you want to measure, at least post-fact, whether it made sense? And he said that the impact that it's going to have is our speed of deployment, the speed of how we onboard new developers, the stability of the environment, and so on. So when he described that in a conversation with me, he instantly started having ideas. Oh, we should start tracking those numbers already, because then we will know whether moving things to that infrastructure is actually moving those numbers in the right direction. So in my opinion, there's no such thing as a technical decision or strategic decision or something like that. You can always pin a number on it and have a conversation about data and not something that people believe or don't believe in. And eventually, you'll end up with a good culture. By the way, that thing in the background that you're working, probably wondering about, is not a penis. It's a bacteria that lives in your gut, and it kind of like makes everything work well. And I think that data can be something like that for your culture. It can keep the conversations, the decisions, and your business healthier thanks to that. So thanks a lot. But this is a new thing I'm trying. It should, when you take a photo of it, it should take you to my LinkedIn page, so you can follow me there and continue the conversation over there. Thanks a lot.
Thank you as well. Thank you, and let's have a couple of questions because you've got the audience excited about what you were speaking. So probably the first one would be, let's see, let's take it from the basics, right? So what would you recommend as the first steps to get a non-data-driven team to start making more data-driven decisions? Back to the roots.
Okay, so I mentioned the technical project example, but we did a similar thing in marketing. Where our marketing wasn't very data informed a while back, and they were overwhelmed with the breadth of the metrics that they should be tracking and the things that they should be doing. So what I suggested to them is that because they were focused, we can only work on one project at a time, and at the time they were focused on designing our email automation flows that would help our users be onboarded into the app and so on. And I encouraged them to start writing those numbers down. Like just the basic numbers of email marketing, the open rate, the click-through rate, whatever, the bounce rate, and so on. And they started writing them down week after week in their reporting, and they added kind of like the decisions that they made along the way. And that kind of, to some extent, got them started. And now they're quite heavily involved in analyzing what we're doing and experimenting and so on.
You've mentioned a couple of, let's say, figures. What would be the most important indicators to start measuring and record data for?
What would be
the most important indicators to start measuring and record the data for?
Oh, this is very unique to your business. This is why I said to read about the North Star, and I wouldn't give you like specific examples. Sean mentioned 2 examples for companies, I think Acorn and Facebook. The Facebook was the daily active users, for instance. For us, what we track is weekly engaged customers. And that's because active means nothing to us. Someone opening a login page does not really mean they've engaged in the product. So we go deeper in the interaction. But this is going to be something that's going to be very unique for your business. So if you want, talk to me later. I'll be happy to figure that out for your particular case.
Okay, one final question, and then of course you can find Marcin at the party we are having right after. How do you measure awareness campaigns in other ways than measuring brand searches?
Oh, this is a really good question, particularly because we build software for marketers. All right, so marketers have been doing that for a while, and they've been trying to measure awareness with polls and things like that. So I'm not sure from how big of a company this question comes, because if you're a big enterprise, you can run a poll on a general population and figure out what's the brand recognition or something like that. But the big question is, why do you want to measure awareness? And it's probably because you want to impact some metric further down the line. So the way I would answer that is, if you can't measure something that is not tangible at the moment or not available to you as a data point at the moment, try to measure the next step. And sometimes this could be because you can measure the original step, but you didn't start measuring it originally, and you want to have some reference to a project that you're starting right now. So for instance, at the beginning, when we implemented product analytics, we didn't want to spend our event quota on measuring our marketing. So we didn't implement it on our blog and the general site, which meant that we started measuring people when they entered our homepage. But what we did have was attributes such as where they came to the homepage from, and so on and so on. And through that, we could more or less make more informed decisions about a data point that was earlier in the funnel than we actually had. So in terms of awareness, you want to measure it probably with your ad click-through rates, because if people recognize your ads, they're more likely to click on them, or maybe in some other performance factor on your site that will correlate with it. This is the kind of like the only advice I would have.
Okay, I think it's great, and thank you very much for being here and for sharing this with us. And you can find Marcin right after in the break, and maybe you can ask him some more questions, because I know for a fact that there were some other questions. Thank you.
All right, thanks.